Good early afternoon. We're live. It's the Tuesday edition. This is Tuesday, right? Okay, it's Tuesday, so this will be the Tuesday edition of the Blue Plate Special. I'm Andy Andrews. You have joined us here in Orange Beach, Alabama at Wisdom Harbor Studios in the financial district of Orange Beach, here at this beautiful thing we call the Wharf, which is the home of the famous escalator statues here in Orange Beach, Alabama. Shanda Danner, hey y'all, hey to you. Barbara Benjamin, hello Sandy. Not us, just Sandy? Huh, okay, all right. Martin Simmons, Floyd the Barber, Gomer says hey. Who else I see? I saw Tammy Nance up there, didn't I? Tammy Nance? Hey, everybody. Hey, Tammy Nance. You and I need to talk. We hadn't talked in a while. Tammy Nance, do you know I talked to Jack Carr yesterday? Jack Carr, the author, you know who I'm talking about? Jack Carr, the #1 New York Times best-selling author. I mean, he's written 7 books. I think every single one of them have gone #1. And his first one was, what was this first one?
Is it the Terminal List?
Yeah, Terminal List. And then that went #1 on Netflix with Chris Pratt playing the hero, and #1 on Netflix. And I mean, it's just, but I did the interview with him yesterday, and that'll air, I think, this week. And man, when he came on, I'm looking at the background, and he has he's in a library. And I said, "Are you in your house?" He said, "I am." I said, "Dude, you are probably the only person I've ever met that has more books than I have." Because people, we've got them just stacked everywhere, and back here and over there, and people say, "Have you read all those books?" Yeah, I have. But it looks like, now maybe he's just got them in one place, but it looks like he has more than I have. I mean, that's a lot of books. Tom Henderson, good afternoon from Clearwater, Florida. Man, our water is clear today. I mean, just a little aside. I mean, because sometimes it's clearer, sometimes it's not as clear. But today, we went over the bridge, and Polly and I both were like, wow, look at that. Dave Huco, hey, how's your water in Phoenix? Hot, I'm sure. Yep. Well, we've got an odd show today. It's a good show. We're going to let you participate. Whatever you want to talk about is what we're going to talk about. We've got several subjects that we could veer into. I've been thinking a lot about things that sound like the truth, but they aren't really the truth. We did a show on that. I think, when did we do that? We did that last Thursday.
I think so.
I think, which we're starting, and it's going to take me a while to write this up, but we're starting a series on Blue Plate, and we may make it a game show on Wisdom Harbor. But it is, I guess the name of it would be, we could call it True or False, and everybody would get that. But we're thinking of a name like Be True or BS. That might be a better name. And so the idea is that we tell some story or give some thing, and in fact, why don't we do the 2 that we put? Can you put those up for me? That we did the other day. We did these just for Wisdom Harbor, so there's a lot of people here that did not hear this. And so this will give you an idea of how the game will go. But we got writers working on it, I'm working on it, and we're going to lay out things that you have to decide. Does this be true? Or does it BS? Okay? And so I'll do a couple for you so you have the idea of what it, anyway, here's the first one. The movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was originally supposed to be a war movie. And let me just go back before I start this and tell you that a good lie is delivered logically, and it's delivered with enough of the truth to make it sound great. See, I'm just curious. I'm just very, very curious about lies today and people telling the truth and how much we fall for, and how do you know? How do you tell? And so we're creating this game show. So here's the first one. All right, let me start over. The movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was originally supposed to be a war movie. Its working title was One Flew Over the Eagle's Nest, and the story was about an Army Ranger parachuting into Hitler's mountain retreat to assassinate him. A young Morgan Freeman was cast as the Army Ranger, and the film was already in pre-production when a historian told Universal Studio head Arthur Goldberg that there were no black Rangers in World War II. Now, this was in 1971 when this movie was being made, and the racial busing was going on as they were desegregating schools. And that made Morgan Freeman in the wrong uniform a risky call for a movie being made in the early 70s. So this is weird, but instead of just casting someone else, Universal pulled the plug. So the movie was dead in its tracks until the producer of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the producer of One Flew Over the Eagle's Nest said to Arthur Goldberg about 50 times, he kept saying, "This is crazy, this is insane, your sister will be devastated," because Arthur Goldberg was his brother-in-law. So, at some point in the harangue, Arthur Goldberg had an idea. He said, we hadn't started principal filming yet. The B-roll that we've already shot can be used in another context. So why don't we just change the whole concept? Instead of One Flew Over the Eagle's Nest, you keep saying this is insane. How about we officially make it insane? Let's call it One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And instead of Hitler's mountain lair, the movie can be about a psychiatric hospital. A cuckoo's nest. So we can make the main character a war veteran, he said. No, a distinguished war veteran, which they did. And he said, and cast Jack Nicholson in the role. Heck, he's crazy anyway. At the Academy Awards, the year the film was released, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest swept the award show. The movie won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Screenplay. Be true or BS? Be true, BS. All right, now you're a thumbs up. But see, all this stuff that I said at the first, that's got y'all voting thumbs down. Because last Thursday, we had more than this in the studio audience, and everybody voted thumbs up that was true, including Sonia and Julie over there. They voted thumbs up, but it's not true. It's not true. It's BS. And I wrote it right before the show the other day. So, but that's good BS, isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, that sounds real. That sounds like something could have happened. All right, here's another one. Sea level is sea level around the world, except along a certain longitudinal line. On a certain longitudinal line, there is a bump of water that is 27 feet higher than sea level. This is called the equatorial bulge, and it exists around the world exactly on the equator. Here's how this happens. On the near side of the Earth, the side facing the moon, the gravitational force of the moon pulls the ocean's waters toward it, creating a bulge on that side. On the far side of the Earth, inertia dominates, which creates a second bulge, and in this way, the combination of gravity and inertia create the bulge of water that circles the globe. Be true? BS. Ooh, BS, 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 be true, BS, 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 BS. It's true. How about that? How about that? Got a whole sailor here. Yes, sir. Hey, you know, I would have voted BS on that too, had I heard that. But I was listening to a book a couple of weeks ago called Pacific Crucible by Ian Toll. And it's a 27-hour on Audible book about just the first part of the Pacific War. And at one thing, yeah, Jerry, that's a good idea. But in one thing, one little part of it, it said that the U.S. fleet was crossing the equator at night, and in effect, they had to go uphill for a bit because of the equatorial bulge. And I thought, what is that? I've never heard of an equatorial bulge. And I immediately Googled it and I was like, what? I've never heard this. But everywhere else in the world, sea level is sea level, but on that thing it's 27 feet higher. Now, obviously it doesn't go like that, okay? But, you know, it gradually gets there. So I think that's just a great one. That's a great one. How about this? The Pacific Ocean is saltier than the Atlantic. And the reason, you all know, you learned in school about evaporation and precipitation. And you know how when you fly from Atlanta to Los Angeles, it takes a certain amount of time. But when you fly from Los Angeles to Atlanta, it's 30 minutes less. Okay? That's because of the jet stream that is prevailing from west to east. Okay? So precipitation and evaporation being static, meaning up and down, when but this also answers why there is more rain in Europe than there is in America, okay? But the evaporation comes up from the Pacific. The jet stream is moving generally west to east, so there's more evaporation out of the Pacific, more precipitation in the Atlantic. Therefore, the Pacific is saltier than the Atlantic. And that's also why there's more rain in Europe than there is in the Americas. Be true? BS. Okay, come on. BS, 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 BS. You don't know? Be true? Thank you. BS, BS, be true. What'd you say, Julie? Oh, you shouldn't say BS. Yeah, it's BS. I made that up on the spot one time when a lady asked, what is saltier, the Pacific or the Atlantic? And of course, everybody at the table was like, yeah, I don't know. But to me, a question that you can BS somebody on, I mean, don't just go, well, no. I mean, come on. Come up with something. I was on a quail hunt one time, and there was an executive from Coca-Cola riding a horse behind me, and one of his friends who was from California. Now, the executive from Coca-Cola was from Georgia, and his friend was from Atlanta, or from California. And we're just riding along, watching the dogs, and this guy from California says to the guy from Georgia, he said, and we're in Georgia, he said, what kind of tree is that? And the guy from Georgia says, oh, no. And I turned around and I said, I know you are a big dog of Coca-Cola, but you have really disappointed me. I cannot think of a worse answer than, oh, no. I mean, you had the opportunity to take your friend for a ride far better than the one he's doing on this horse. You had the opportunity to say, it's curious that you would pick out that particular tree. We called that an angel tree. And I'm not sure if that's the real name of it, but locally it's called an angel tree because it actually when it comes out of the ground, it spreads a little bit, and it does that for a couple of years, but then in one springtime, it goes up to like 60, 70 feet, and that little clump is on top. And it puts out, when it goes straight up, clump stays on top, and it puts out a limb on the right and a limb on the left. And it's like this. And that what you're looking at there is an immature angel tree. I mean, that one hasn't had the spring yet. But maybe next spring, maybe it'll be the spring before. I'll take a picture of it and send it to you if you want. But that will grow 60, 70 feet in one spring and then the guy would have said, really? And you could have said, no, I just made that up. And just smile at him. But you said, oh no. That's the most boring answer you could possibly have. Yes, LaDonna Gatlin says, BS on the Spot by Andy Andrews. Yes, this is an art form. This is an art form. I recently talked. Jerry Anderson just called in and said, can I talk about Joan Rivers? Yes, I can. I recently had a Zoom conversation with a friend of mine that I have not laid eyes on or talked to in 50 years. And we were great friends. I mean, I was in love with her. She was beautiful, and, I was looking like a younger version of this. And she told me at one point, she said, I still have that Auburn pillow that you gave me for my 15th birthday. And I was like, I gave you an Auburn pillow? I didn't remember it, but I said, man, I know I was in love with you, but I must have really had it bad to give you an Auburn pillow. She said, you even told me you were for Auburn. I was like, what? Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, that's like denying Jesus, to say that I was for Auburn. That's like, you can put me and Peter in the same thing. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. I denied Auburn once, which is almost as bad. I denied Alabama once. But anyway, so I talked to her, and it's funny because most of the people that I grew up with, they have gotten in touch with me in one form or another. I just on social media, through email, through friends. But, at one point or another, the people that I grew up with have turned past me on a television channel and went, is that Andy Andrews? I've had 2 careers or 3 careers. I've been a comedian. I've been an author and been a speaker. And I guess a 4th career, I work with businesses now and teams. And so that's covered a lot of ground. And so people generally know what I've kind of been up to. But she didn't know anything. I mean, anything. And it was hilarious in a way, because I said something about Joan Rivers, and she said, oh yeah, I like her. And I said, well, I toured with her for 2 years. And he goes, what? And I mean, she just knew. She found me because she found a couple of the books. Okay, so she knew nothing about the comedy stuff. And so that's funny, because that was such a huge part of my life. Joan Rivers, Kenny Rogers, all these guys that I worked with. But Joan is Jerry wanted me to talk about Joan because she is an anomaly to me, because everybody had this view of her, this mean, kind of crass, biting, but she was the sweetest lady. I mean, she was witty and she was fast and she wouldn't let you get away with nothing, but she was nice. This was one of the most generous, nice people I've ever been around in my life. And, I've been around a lot of people that have been stopped in airports and stopped in restaurants and all, and I've seen the gamut of responses that celebrities have talking to people and all like that. But I was with Joan pretty much everywhere she went for 2 years, because I did every date with her for 2 years, and I saw a lot of people stop her in airports, and a lot of people stop by her seat on the airplane, and a lot of people come up to us in restaurants, and not one time was she ever less than gracious, and always just very nice to everybody. But I'll tell you an amazing story about Joan, and then I'll tell you a funny story about Joan. I could tell you stories from now until 3 or 4 o'clock, but one of the amazing stories about Joan, let's see, which one do I want to tell? Well, how about this? One night we were at the World's Fair in Vancouver, and it was the last date on the tour. We had done like 9 or 10 dates and 9 or 10 nights in a row. So this was the last date on the tour. And so this just tells you about Joan. So we had done the first show, and I was in the dressing room or in her dressing room, and Joan was there, Billy Samuth, her manager, Ed Cassis, her agent, Dorothy, the road manager who became the manager, and which Dorothy and I still keep up. Dorothy lives in Israel now, and so I've been keeping up with her. But so it was the last day of the tour. We'd done the first show, second show still to come, and Joan says to me, she says, where do you go from here? And I told her wherever it was, and she said, how are you getting to the airport in the morning? And I said, just taxi. And she said, take the limo. I said, no, that's all right. She said, just take the limo. She said, they've got it for me for 24 hours, and a driver's sitting with it for 24 hours, and I'm not going to be leaving till noon, so you're leaving early. Take the limo. Okay, all right. And so she said, have you got your check? Now, this was kind of a constant question, which always made me think that somewhere somebody stiffed Joan, okay? Because, because she was more concerned about my money than than I was about my money. But that was typical of her. She said, have you got your check? I said, no, not yet, but it's fine. Well, she looked over at Ed Cassis, who's the agent, and she said, "Where's Andy's check?" And he said, "It's at the hotel." And she said, "Can you get it?" And he said, "I've got to settle up with the venue on the next show." And I said, "Joan, it's okay. I'm not even going home. I mean, just mail it. It's fine." She said, "No, don't ever leave anywhere without your check." And she said to Ed again, "You can't go get it. You can't send somebody after it." He said, "We're fixing to start settling up right now. Both my assistants are in on that." And I'm going, "Joan, really, it's okay. I mean, it's not like I don't trust you guys. I mean, it's like, okay." She said, "No." She said, "Hand me my purse. Hand me my purse." And so Billy Samuth handed her a purse. She dug around in it. She got out her checkbook, and on her personal account, Joan Rosenberg, she wrote the full amount out for my tour and gave it to me. And I am ashamed to say that I did not get a copy of that check. If I had a copy of that check right now, it would be framed in my office on Joan Rosenberg. But I kept, I didn't do it. I can't believe I didn't do it. I guess then I didn't know I was going to meet this many people and, have something to talk about all of them. I did her, if you look over in this case over here, you remember when she quit Carson and when all that was going on, it was just a big blow up. And I was there. I was, that 2 years of her life, I was there for like so many things. I was there when she quit Carson. I was there when Edgar killed himself, her husband. Just a lot of stuff going on during that 2 years. But she also had her talk show on Fox. And I did the first night. I did the very first night. It was me, Kenny G, somebody else, I can't remember. But her crew gave her, for her desk, a thing like, you have your nameplate on the desk, but it said, "Can we talk?" which was her thing. And it said October 9th, some such a date, premiere show, whatever. Well, I stole it. And I've got it right over there. It's in that, I think that end thing there. But one night, here's a funny story about Joan. Joan was always, she was terrified of gaining weight, which I don't know why. I mean, she literally came up to my chin. She was that tall or that short, and she was skinny as a stick, and so, but she was terrified of gaining weight. And so when we would fly, we flew commercial, but there was like 7 of us. I think 7. There was Joan, Billy, Ed, there's Jason, the hair guy, the makeup lady, and then my buddy in Israel and me. So 7 of us. And so they would board her first, okay? They would always, I don't see that anymore. I don't see them boarding celebrities early, but they boarded her early. Get her sitting down, get everybody sitting down. Well, they all flew first class. Not me. I was buying my own tickets. And so I was flying coach. So there's 6 of them in first class. But she would always have me board early with them. But I'd go to the back of the plane. And Joan would always say, every third time, she would say, "Enjoy that coach. Enjoy that coach seat. You pay attention to how close that seat is to your knees. When your back starts hurting, you remember that." And she would say, "Because you're not always going to fly coach. At some point in your life, you're probably going to be flying first class, and you don't ever need to forget what it feels like in coach." And so I would be back there, and this was back when they gave great food in first class. I mean, now it's just like a plastic tray kind of thing, but they had great food, great desserts. I mean, they would do sundaes that would be, big, tall sundaes in first class. And of course, she wouldn't eat it. She wouldn't eat it. And instead of saying, no, I don't want one, every flight, here would come the flight attendant carrying that sundae all the way to the back. And of course, everybody got on the plane knowing that's Joan Rivers. And man, she had been hosting the Tonight Show over and over again. I mean, she was huge. And so here would come this flight attendant carrying this sundae, and she'd stop at me and she'd say, Miss Rivers said to give this to you. Thank you. And of course, everybody's like, who are you? But I ate many of Joan's sundaes, but she was terrified of gaining weight. So I forget where we were one night, but I was out after the show. I forget what I was doing, but there were still people hanging around. And there was this lady, and I never will forget, she had bleached blonde hair, kind of short, kind of poofed up, but she was huge. Okay, she was huge. Like maybe, 300 plus for sure. All right. I don't know how to judge that, but she was twice me. Okay. So I said hi to her, and she said, hey, you were great. I said, oh, thank you. And she said, I came here to see Joan. I've seen her like 10 times. I said, really? She said, I just love Joan. She said, people say I look like her. And I don't know what came over me right then, but I said, you do. The resemblance is uncanny. And man, Joan needs to meet you. And she said, oh, I've never met her. And I said, oh, no, she needs to meet you. It's like looking into a mirror. And I said, she is waiting right back here with Dorothy for the car. And so come on, let me take you back there and introduce you to her, because she would love to meet you. This is just bizarre. And she said, oh, are you sure? I said, oh, you must, And so we start going down the hall, and she's like, and we get to a corner, and my dressing room is over here, and I can hear Joan and Dorothy talking around the corner. I said, oh, they're right around there. I got to stop in here and grab something. You go on. I'll be right there. She said, are you sure? I said, absolutely. Just go right there. They're just right down the hall right there. And I'm going to pop in here. I'll be right with you. So I turn like I'm going toward there. She goes around the corner. I quickly duck back and I look around the corner. And I see her walking up to Joan and Dorothy. And Joan and Dorothy turn. They look like, and this is somebody they don't recognize, so they're like, like this. And so I can kind of hear a little bit about what's being said. So I see the woman's got her back to me, and Joan is kind of on the side, and Dorothy's like facing me, and I can hear the lady say, well, what people say, I look like you, and I see Joan go, oh, like that, and look at Dorothy, and Dorothy goes, oh, and what's your name? And so as soon as I know that information has exchanged hands, I run out from behind the corner, and I run up to the lady, and I tap her on the back, and I say, Joan, they want you back. Oh, I'm sorry, you're not Joan. And the lady's like, see? And Joan is like, And from then on, every time I'd see a big woman with bleached blonde hair, I would say to Joan, I'd say, I'm gonna stop talking. I thought that was you. Anyway, Joan was great. She was great. Alana Gatlin says, what a gracious, generous lady. Loved the personal check story. Too bad I didn't frame a copy of it. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You know, you always wonder when you're working with some of these people and you're the opening act, you wonder, do I go in? Do I say something? Do I not say something? Do I tell them hey? Are they going to be mad if I don't tell them hey? Are they going to be mad if I tell them hey? If I come in their dressing room? I mean, it's a crapshoot because some of these people are weird. And so Joan taught me a lot of lessons about how to treat somebody in that position. And the very first night I ever did anything with her, knock on the door, and it's Joan. And she said, hey, I just wanted to check with you, and can I come in? And I said, sure. She said, I just wanted to see what you had in your dressing room. And they've got so much stuff in there for me. They've got food in there, so you are welcome in my dressing room. You don't have to knock, just come in. My dressing area is in there, and so just come on in. But they've got food in there, sandwich stuff, and did you see how much the hamburgers were at the hotel? Don't buy a hamburger there. You don't need an $18 hamburger. Just make sandwiches out of mine before you go back. And I mean, she would do that, but she did that the very first night, which just took all the fear away about, do I go in the dressing room? Do I not go in the dressing room? And then at the end of that tour, the last date of that first tour I ever did with her was at Westbury Music Fair on Long Island. And this is the first time I met Howard Stern at Westbury Music Fair. And I remember seeing him out in the hall and thinking, oh, God, he's going to hate me. Because I was clean. And I asked Joan one time, I said, why me? Why are you and me? She said, well, it's a great combination because you're like the boy next door and I'm the witch leaning over the back fence talking about her neighbors. And I said, okay. But I saw Howard Stern there, and I thought, oh, he's going to hate me. But he was real nice. And I ran into some guy like 6 months later in the Chicago airport. He came up to me and said, are you Andy Andrews? And I said, yes. He said, I'm a friend of Howard Stern's. He just loves you. Like, okay. But that's the last I ever heard. I never saw him again, never heard from him again. But it was like, wow, Howard Stern loves me. All right. Okay. But that was the last night of this tour. And it was the last night of the first tour that I ever did with Joan. And I was making more than I had ever made. I was getting paid more than I'd ever been paid on any tour or anything. And, it wasn't a fortune, but it seemed like it to me. But I think we did 9 dates, if I'm remembering that right. We did 9 dates, and that was the last one. And so the between shows, we always did 2 shows. And so between shows, Billy Samuth came, knocked on my door. He was her business manager at the time. He was also Cher's business manager. But he knocked on the door and said, hey, how are you? And I said, great. And he said, okay, well, I have your check and just wanted to give this to you and tell you thanks. The tour's been great, and we'll get in touch with you for more work. And so that was the first clue that I had that they were going to use me again. And so I was like, oh, thank God. And I said, thank you, Billy. And I put the check in my pocket. And, then he leaves the room. And I immediately, after looking at it, And when I look at it, I quickly do the math, and I'm like, this is wrong. It was too much. And it was exactly twice as much as it should have been. And I'm thinking, oh no. Is this some kind of test? You know? I mean, I can't just leave, you know? So, you know, is this some kind of test to see if I'm going to be honest or something? Like, oh man. So I went in the dressing room, and I never will forget, Joan was in there. I could see her in her dressing area. The door was open, and she was sitting down getting her hair done. And Billy and Ed and Dorothy and everybody's out in this big area. And I come in, and I think back on it now, and I remember seeing Dorothy and Billy kind of smirk at me. You know, like, what are you doing here? And they knew what I was doing there. And so I sat down, and Joan says, hey. I said, hey, Joan. She said, did you get your check? I said, I did. She says, everything okay? I said, no, ma'am. She said, yeah, it's okay. And I said, no, ma'am, actually, it's for too much. And she said, no, it's not. It's fine. I said, Joan, I saw our original contract. I mean, it's for too much. It's for exactly twice as much. And she said, and she turned in her chair facing me, and she said, let me tell you something. She said, you have been great on this tour. You've been easy to be around, fun to be around. The people, the audiences love you, and that money will mean more to your family right now than it would to my family. I'm making plenty of money, she said, and so that would mean more to you than it would mean than that bit that, you know, would mean to me. And so I want you to enjoy that, know that you earned it, and do it for somebody else one day. So, I mean, she was right. I mean, it was like, oh my God, I'm making more than I've ever made. Now I'm making twice as much. I mean, and so something she didn't have to do, and I never had anybody else ever do it. Trust me. I turned down during that time, sometime during that time, I was starting to get, you know, my name was getting around with all these stars. You know, I toured with Cher and Shaka Khan and Dolly, Kenny for 5 years, Randy Travis, Garth Brooks. I mean, tons of people. And so my name was getting around, you know. And and Wayne Newton, his people called and wanted me to do 3 road dates with Wayne Newton. And you know how much they offered? Nothing. Your pay is getting to perform with Wayne. Oh, really? Yeah, that is your compensation, is being able to say that you worked with Wayne Newton. I'm sorry. I don't think I'll ever be poor enough to boost somebody's ego in that way. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, that's just because the numbers, I'm telling stuff that nobody would know right now, but the numbers, when you go to a concert and you see the headliner, you see the opening act, the numbers are not what everybody thinks. Because everybody thinks, wow, if the headliner's making $100,000, the opening act's probably making $20,000, and you know that's what people think. but there is a division, and it's there's the featured act, there's what's called a special guest, and then the opening act. And if they have a special guest, it's somebody you probably know, okay? But the money for a special guest is dramatically lower than for a headliner, okay? And so because it's the headliners selling the tickets, headliners controlling the tour, it's the headliners people negotiating the contracts. And so on a typical thing that you might see, and I got to tell you, it doesn't matter if you're a single comedian or if you're a band. If the headliner's making $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 for the night, the special guest might get, let's say $100,000, just round numbers. If the featured act's making $100,000, if there's a special guest and an opening act, the special guest is probably getting $15,000 to $20,000, and the opening act's getting $1,000. And that's even if the opening act's a band. And in a way, it's kind of, in a way, Wayne Newton was right. I mean, you got to get on those tours to get people to know you, but you got to be a real butthole not to pay somebody something. I mean, I just always thought, what a turd, Wayne Newton. And 14 years old on Bonanza, and I thought, you butthole, you're going to grow up to be a butthole. But it's also, my family and close friends know that, like, when we go to a concert over here at the Wharf and we see some big act that doesn't even have an opening act, I don't think much of those people, because it's like, okay, I know you don't need an opening act, but were you never an opening act? Did nobody ever give you the opportunity? Did nobody ever share their stage with you? And so you have this massive platform, and you can't share the stage with somebody who's coming up. I just don't think a lot of that. I'll give you an idea about the best I ever had. First of all, Kenny Rogers always make sure my name was on the tickets, my name was on the stuff, and this is not true of everybody. But with Joan, my name was always on the tickets. Well, Joan took me to Las Vegas for my first time. Took me to Caesar's Palace for the first time. And I grew up watching The Tonight Show and Johnny saying, and where are you going to be next week? Well, I'm going to be at Caesar's Palace. And, and I always thought, oh my God, that's just like the biggest place ever. And it was then. And so I remember finding out that there was a comedy duo called Mac and Jamie. They were from Mississippi. Really great. I don't know what happened to them, but they were really great. Probably writing books and speaking and doing some Blue Plate special somewhere. But and they're probably going, Andy Andrews, I don't know what happened to him. But anyway, Mac and Jamie were opening. They were being the opening act for Diana Ross, who Diana Ross is one of those people that we don't like. So anyway, I knew they were going to be right before us and opening for Diana Ross. And so I remember thinking, man, I hope, please, God, let my name just be on that sign, just little bit, little Andy Andrews on that big Caesar's Palace sign. And that is a negotiated thing too in contracts. It's called, you get a percentage like a special guest might be at 50%, which means if the featured performer, if his name is at 100%, a special guest name might be at 50%. The letters in their name are that big. And opening acts are typically 10%. Okay, so featured performer, opening act down here. And so, but I'm thinking, please God, let my name be on that thing so I can take a picture of it and we can use it in our promotional. See, he was actually there. And so when I get there the day before, and Diana Ross, her name is in 5-foot letters on that monstrous Caesars sign, but Mac and Jamie's name's not on there. And I had, from the airport, I saw this big Caesars billboard that had Diana Ross's picture on it. Nothing about Mac and Jamie. And then there, the name's not on the sign. So I go in to check in, and there's big, signs in the lobby and everything. Diana Ross. Nothing about Mac and Jamie. And I thought, are they here? I didn't know. And so I checked in. I was headed to the elevator. Elevator opens up, and Mac comes out. And I'm like, hey, I'm glad you're here. I didn't know if you were here or not. He goes, yeah, I know. I said, so I didn't want to even say it. Your name's not. And he said, yeah, she wouldn't allow our name to be on the sign. She would not allow our name to be on the table tents in the showroom. She would not even allow us to be introduced. We just had to walk out and start. Like, wow. And I went to my room thinking, okay, well, whether my name's up there or not, at least Joan lets me be introduced, and went to bed that night, woke up the next day, opened the window, and there's a picture of it over in that cabinet there beside Joan's thing. It was me, and Joan was the featured act. Nell Carter, remember Nell Carter? Nell Carter was the special guest, the singer between the comedians, and then me, the opening act. And that Caesar sign had Joan Rivers' name in 5-foot high letters, Nell Carter's name in 5-foot high letters, and Andy Andrews' name in 5-foot high letters. I was blown away. Then driving around town, the Caesar signs had Joan Rivers' picture, the same size as Nell Carter's picture and Andy Andrews' picture, the same size. And I've thought about that for years because there was no bigger star at the time than Joan Rivers. There was no bigger star. And she knew I wasn't selling any tickets, but the only thing she could do was help me. Putting my name up in 5-foot high letters was not going to take away from her show. It was not going to take away from her power. It was not going to take away from her fame. The only thing it could do was help me and help Nell. And she did that. She didn't have to. Obviously, she didn't have to. Diana Ross didn't. I mean, so many people did not. And I have always just thought great things about her. So Dina Kilpatrick says, I bet you are loaded with stories you have never told. I am, and I'm thinking about a bunch of them, but it's already 10 after 1. We've been talking for 55 minutes, and I've got a phone call I got to get on. I want to come say hey to y'all out there. So that's kind of a crazy show today, but I hope you enjoyed it. We had a good time. And we're not going to be airing Thursday. I'm going to be out, and so Thursday we're not going to be airing, but we'll have something special for you. Thank you. See you soon.